Hi everyone, Jake here from Fulfilled. Today I'm very excited to be talking with Oxfam Australia's Head of Digital, Aaron Lamb. Aaron, welcome.
Hi.
So you've been doing digital marketing for a long time now. Tell us about how you learnt it and then how that led you to a career working in the NGO.
I learnt it by complete accident. So I was working at Lonely Planet on reception. And at the time, MySpace was the big thing that was going on and no one really knew what to do with it. And our brilliant chief executive at the time, Judy Sluttier, who's at Red Cross now, she took a bit of a chance and said, all right, well, let's explore this. Let's get someone doing it. And that someone was me. So I fell into it by pure accident. And in that job, because it was all so new, no one really knew what to do with it all. So I just self-taught. Got onto Google, did all the self-help in there, went onto all sorts of different websites and just downloaded all the sort of wiki information they used to have at the time before all the training courses really opened up, and just learnt it all like that.
So what did you find was the differences, say, working between a Lonely Planet compared to working at your first job for non-government organisations?
Yeah, the big difference, I guess, was the way in which you talk to people. So my first job in the charity sector was with an organisation called Sparna, which is an animal protection organisation. They do veterinary work with animals all across Africa and the Middle East. And the way in which we spoke to those people was far more emotional. Whereas the way we spoke to people at Lonely Planet was far more about, here's this amazing guide, it's on sale now, go get it if you're going travelling. And I really loved that because there's such a storytelling element to the work that we do in this sector. You know, a lot of our organisations thrive because we can tell these incredible, passionate stories about the change, about the good stuff that's going on in the world. And being able to tell those stories to supporters, I absolutely loved.
So you started at Oxfam in 2013. Yep. How has your role changed over those years?
Dramatically. So when I started at Oxfam, we had a good digital program, we had a couple of people, but it was still very much that sort of, go send this email, go do this particular thing on the website. And these days, the team is much more a partner in the organisation, working with other departments that usually would have said, you need to do this, and be very prescriptive. And that's been a brilliant change because it's enabling people who are really good in their specialities to work with each other and lean on each other and take this sort of strength-based approach. You know, none of us are unicorns, and yet because of the way that we've historically been set up, there's a way in which people are set up to fail because they're expected to know everything about this brand new channel that's just emerged out of nowhere. They're not going to do that, but there's someone that does. So bringing that all together has been a real change in my working environment at Oxfam.
Yeah, great. And was that something you implemented in your time there, or was it someone else, someone a bit higher, that thought this change needed to happen?
It kind of happened organically. So as digital started to grow as a channel of response for supporters, it became clear quite quickly that there's real opportunity in here to deepen the engagement with the supporter, to acquire new people into the organisation because it was really cheap to go out there and talk to people online rather than send letters everywhere. But then those best practice direct marketing techniques aren't something that should just be completely ignored. They get integrated into a new channel. And now you've got a direct mail channel, you've got your telemarketing channel, you have a digital channel. And they all work in slightly different ways. And you need the right people in those channels to get the best out of them. So it became clear quite quickly as the channel of digital grew. You know, when I started, we were around 10% of, say, an appeals income. And now it's around 50%. And so that balance has to be addressed because you can't just keep going on the same way you were going on. You need to learn how to bring that balance together between these different channels to create the best possible experience for a supporter.
I'm getting really excited because I love talking digital about how it comes into an organisation. So now your role, you're head of digital.
Head of digital engagement, yep.
Digital engagement. So what does your role specifically entail?
So my role is very much give us some money and we'll make some money. kind of role. So we will use digital platforms, all of the digital channels that are out there, to put together a multi-channel campaign to deliver an outcome for whichever stakeholder we're engaging with. So whether that be your traditional appeal, whether that be generating leads for the regular giving team to go and talk to, or whether that's around mobilising a community to take action on a certain issue and go write a letter to your MP, sign a petition that will deliver. There's a myriad of things that come into the team. We have these big goals that we need to meet, and so we'll say, right, this is how we're going to try and meet these goals that you need.
Yeah, great. Yeah. So what stands out as some of your most successful campaigns and what made them successful?
Yeah, there's a couple I really liked, both in fundraising world. So the first one was, one of the reasons I work at an organisation like Oxfam is that we can do so much good in the world. And I think that's particularly true in the case of an emergency, a rapid onset emergency. So that's sort of, if there's an earthquake. And the Nepal earthquake was the biggest one that I've dealt with in my time at Oxfam. And it was amazing to be part of an organisation that had people on the ground and could deploy and start helping people right away. And as soon as that earthquake hit, what was really interesting about the way in which we worked is that it hit at a weekend. So no one was in the office. I was actually on holiday in Lakes Entrance with my family, but I had my laptop with me. And being able to run a campaign from a laptop, nowhere near an office, really gives you the sense of power that you can do with digital. And I sat there and I ran that campaign, and it was the most successful emergency campaign we've ever run at Oxfam. We won 2 FIA awards for it, and we were able to deliver millions of dollars of impact for people who'd been affected by that earthquake within days, and really make a real difference to people's lives on the ground. And that was just amazing to be a part of that, and to really feel like this work is doing something incredibly good in the world right now. And then the other one was an appeal we had for Zimbabwe. And we took a bit of a different approach with this appeal online, where we could actually use what digital can do really well. So, that interactive element that digital provides, we don't use it as much as we'd like to, because I think a lot of us are a little risk adverse to testing brand new things. We've got our tried and tested formula, but digital brings a whole new element to that. And this was the first time we really did something different. And we ran this thing called Impossible Choices. And so basically a supporter was sent to a beautiful landing page that the team had put together, and they were asked a question. Do you send your child to school, or do you go get water? Which one do you do? Whichever choice you take is an impossible choice, because it means your kid doesn't go to school or your kid doesn't get water. And then the answer was, working with Oxfam, you being a supporter, we can change the lives for these people in this village doing this work. And it was a wonderful, wonderful campaign, one of our best June appeals ever. And again, we were able to go out there and put some good into the world.
Yeah, sounds great. In terms of the Nepal campaign, was there procedures in place for when an emergency was happening? Did they just press the button and everyone was out on the weekend to the office and getting it ready? How did you prepare for that in advance?
Yeah. So this was a fascinating example of something that we're trying to build out into the business further. So we're talking about this thing called collective accountability at the moment. So this is where, like I was saying earlier with the unicorn, no one is a unicorn. And collective accountability enables that strength-based approach to say, hey, you're the person that knows how to run digital marketing, communications, etc. Go do your thing. Don't come and check in with me, because I've got to do the letters, and this person's got to do the telemarketing, and this person's got to do this and this. So with that was one of the first times where we had a rule book, we had like a procedures book, but we sort of stepped out of it a little bit, in that the trust across the organisation to respond to this emergency was just absolute everywhere. No one checked in for anything. It was just go, do your thing, get out there, I trust you. So it was great having the foundation, but taking that little step out of that and having that collective accountability meant that I sat there on holiday in Lakes Entrance, chasing down the data, pivoting on the spot, spending what I needed to in order to generate the best possible outcome without having to go through traditional layers of management and sign off and agreement and all this kind of stuff. Just go and do, and it was brilliant.
Wow, yeah, it sounds really good. And I think your passion really comes through to saying that you're on holiday and you're ready for response when an emergency comes through. I mean, reflecting on that, I guess, was there still the consistencies across departments? Was the messaging still the same across face-to-face? I guess on the weekend would have been a bit more difficult. But across digital, the website, the support team, did you look back and think, oh, we could have done that differently, or everything just went to plan?
For that one, everything just went to plan. And it was because we were also sharing. We were sharing with each other. We weren't working in these silos. When I did something, I'd shoot it off to who was running the appeal at the time. I'd shoot it off to the people who needed to know, so they could see what I was doing, but I just didn't need to get it ticked off. Didn't need it signed off. It was just shared, and we just grew that organically. But, you know, we had our media team out with the same messaging that was on digital, that was in the DM pack, that was going on the email, that was out on the streets. It was all coordinated brilliantly through the sort of facilitated management style rather than that command and control style. So yeah, it was wonderful.
So that lean sign-off process, is that something that's coming more and more that you've found?
We're trying to develop that. It's harder when you have things that have, say, a really long lead time, and things change through that lead time, or new things come on top and workload for team blows out because of a particular problem. So that bit's harder, but that's where we're looking to move towards. So we've been experimenting with that at Oxfam with some really interesting pros and cons. But yeah, it's been a fascinating time.
Yeah. On the flip side of that, is there times where you can think where things didn't quite go to plan, but you still learned from it, but you look back on it and thought we could have done that a bit differently?
Yeah, so there was this great thing that Oxfam in Spain were doing, and they were delivering these brilliant results, and they were basically like sending out these ebooks on how you can live ethically and sustainably and all this kind of stuff, which we know our supporters are interested in. And it worked really well for their market. And we thought, great, good idea, tested well, we'll take that, we'll do it here. And what we didn't do was think through our market. And each market is slightly different. And so we put all this work in, we got the first one up and running, we put it out there, we're expecting these results to roll in, and they didn't. And of course, our people are slightly different. Each market, so say with Oxfam Shop, for instance, in the UK, it's your traditional op shop. But here, it was a high-end, beautiful, partner-produced pieces of work. So markets are different, segmentation needs to be different, messaging needs to be different, and we didn't adjust it enough. We just thought we could run with it. Yeah. So that's always good to know.
Is that something that you leverage off as the international organisations? So Oxfam UK, Oxfam US, do you leverage off each other?
Yeah, absolutely. So we actually have like one Oxfam Moments. So Davos, the World Economic Forum, is often a time when all of the Oxfams will be talking about tax and the issues of offshore and all this kind of stuff, and how that money could be put back into the system and alleviate poverty around the world. And that as a global message is really powerful.
Yeah, great. So how has digital changed as an acquisition for fundraising teams?
Yeah, so, you know, as I was saying earlier, with acquisition in particular, that used to be face-to-face on the streets, biggest source of acquisition for an organisation. And that's really plateaued in the last couple of years as that market matures. That's what happens when the market matures. Whereas I think what's interesting with digital is that what worked 5 years ago doesn't work now. New things come on all of the time. You know, in my time doing digital, it used to be MySpace, and then it moved into early days of Facebook. And now there's a whole range of channels out there. And within that, these organisations obviously need to monetize their platforms. And so they're constantly pushing for ways that businesses can generate the goals they need on their platforms. So something like lead generation didn't exist 5 years ago, and now it's becoming ubiquitous. What's the next thing that's going to happen? What's the next thing after that? So, these tech companies are constantly in a state of iteration, which means our channels are in a constant state of iteration as well. We need to keep up with that. So my thing at the moment is around chatbots. And how incredible they are as an engagement device for people to get involved with an organisation and start to ask questions that they want to know. That push-pull has really changed. We used to push out comms through email, letters, etc., and tell people stuff. There's a lot more of a conversation coming back now. And something like a chatbot, for instance, which didn't exist 5 years ago, is a really great way to have a conversation with someone.
So how do you build a chatbot into your strategy?
Yeah, we're actually doing it at the moment.
Right.
So, engagement, experience for a supporter is such a huge priority. Because without an experience, without an emotional connection with an organisation, you can ask them to do things a million times. Will they do it? I'm not sure. Other people would argue yes, other people would argue no. For me, I don't think so. And so I feel like experience for a supporter is more important than ever, especially with the proliferation of charities now. I can't remember actually how many charities there are in Australia, but there are a lot. And we know that our supporters support 3 or 4 other organisations. So why would they pick one over the other? I believe it's to do with the experience that people get. And so I want to create that much more dynamic conversation with people, and digital allows you to do that.
Yeah, and that kind of leads in, if not answers, the next question about how important does digital play a role in the nurturing stages of the donor experience?
I think really important. But like I was saying earlier, it's a balance. So we can't move too far away from what's always worked, because it does still work. What we need to be able to do as organisations is iterate together and find that balance between what's always worked and new things that are working. It's never one over the other. And so when we're talking about acquisition, there's 7 drivers of donor loyalty, right? And so each one of those drivers has different things in different channels. Finding that balance is the most important part, rather than prioritising one over the other. Now, digital has grown a lot in this space, but how we find that balance with other channels and with other teams is the most important bit, because if digital decides to go off on its own and creates a silo, well, that's to the detriment of the supporter. So how we learn to draw those lines together is the most important thing for acquiring and then maintaining a relationship with a supporter.
How do you continually learn about, well, I was going to say fundraising, but more digital fundraising?
Well, these days, thankfully, there's a lot of different organisations out there. There's a lot of different training. The Google Help Center has just improved so much over the years that you could learn how to be a digital marketeer just by reading how Google does its thing. And learning how to work within Google. I also think that our industry is maturing. So there's a lot more people who are marketeers who happen to specialize and are digitally native. I would put myself in one of those things. Like, I learned marketing before I learned the channels. And so as the platforms mature, as the industry matures, as results start to continue to move into, digital being a preferred choice, all of these things breed more and more people and more opportunities to learn.
What advice could you give to a fundraising team who haven't yet utilised digital as a means of generating income for their organisation? And where would they start?
First bit of advice, don't be afraid. It's a big, big beast, but do not be afraid. That beast is there to help. And there's several ways that you can start. And very, very, very simply, it's around Google Analytics on a website. So instead of jumping into digital and saying, right, I want a social media strategy, and I want email, and I want this, and I want this, jump into your Google Analytics first. Have a look at how people are getting to your site and what they're doing when they're there. And then start to build out from there. Because what you might find is that people are already searching for you. They're searching for what you do. Now, if that's the case, you start with a search strategy. Don't start with a Facebook strategy, start with search. You might find that loads of people are finding you because people are spreading your message online organically through social media. Fantastic. Start with a social media strategy and segment your audience on there. So often we'll find that, what we assume about what's happening with a particular campaign, we go into Google Analytics, apply some segments, demographics, interests, all this kind of stuff, and we'll start to see that it's the exact opposite audience to the one we thought it was. So go in there, bust all of the myths and assumptions that you might have, figure out where you're already pretty strong, start from a point of strength is what I would advise.
Yep. And I'm sure some fundraisers would be instantly put off thinking, analytics, I don't even want to know about it. But it's not hard to learn, is it?
No.
The early stages.
Not at all.
I mean, you just covered a few snippets of what you should cover. What advice do you give to new people in digital coming through to Oxfam?
So very similar, don't be afraid. Digital is a channel that is constantly changing and evolving, and if you try and learn the textbook, you'll have to throw the textbook out in a year's time anyway. Start with the discipline. Start with learning how to do marketing, how to do fundraising, how to do campaigning. Learn those skills first, because those skills will help you interpret what you need to do within a digital channel to make the very best bang for your buck. Once you've got that, then again, my thing is around data is art. Data is pretty pictures to me. And if that's not your bag, then there will be someone whose bag it is. Whether they're inside the organisation or outside the organisation, they're the ones that can help you get the insight into the data. And if you get a couple of pearls of insight and you've got that knowledge of the marketing discipline, then the tools are there for you. You just pick them up and start using them.
Yeah, I love that answer, by the way. I think that's a really good way of putting it. And I think I jumped ahead on the question, but that's right. So I know that many organizations will say that email is the biggest acquisition digital channel for them. What goes into creating a successful email? How do you get donors and supporters to open that email and take action?
Test. So we have a constant debate at work around the very best way to do email. And there's a traditional way, and then there's new ways that come along all of the time. There's the take a need-based approach, there's the take an impact-based approach. There's always ideas, and that creative friction is a good thing, because if you just continually did the same thing, we wouldn't have moved on since the 80s. So that's a good thing. But email allows you to test. And like I was saying earlier with the example of we took something from a foreign market thinking it would work here and it didn't. Same with email. Just because you think this will work, it's what's worked before, doesn't mean it's going to work now. And just the same with a new thing, you might test it one time and go, great, it works, brilliant, we're going to email like that from now on. No, iterate on that. And email allows you to do that. You can split test your file really simply and test your ideas and just take a really simple approach to it. So if you're running a campaign, test one idea, one big idea in that email. And then at the end of it, figure out what happened with your supporters. Take the winning one and then iterate on that next time, and then iterate next time and next time and next time.
Yeah, what kind of results have you seen out of A/B testing or multivariate testing?
Yeah, so we've seen some really interesting results, particularly around this idea of taking people on a journey within email rather than ask. Now, ask is best practice 101, and it works really well for certain segments of the database, and it doesn't work well for other segments of the database. Whereas the journey, we tested that 2 years ago, worked really well and beat the ask, which was really interesting. And it wasn't because the hypothesis was that at the end of the campaign, people will be more inclined to give because they've gone through this journey. But it actually won at every stage. People gave more at every stage than the traditional ask, ask, ask. But then we went out with a similar approach a year later with a different campaign, and the ask, ask, ask one. So you've got to constantly be playing and testing in this space to make sure that you're finding the right elements for the particular campaign, because it might be your messaging. Your messaging might actually work better for a journey because you're doing something around something that's in your DNA, like Oxfam's DNA is around water and food and livelihoods and all this kind of stuff for our fundraising asks. So because people know and understand that about you, the journey worked better. But say you're doing something different, like disaster risk reduction, which isn't something that we talk about all of the time with supporters. Maybe they need to be able to understand, well, if I give X, that's what happens, and they don't want to go on a journey. So constantly be looking at what you're doing and how you're doing it and test each time. And eventually, when you run a testing program over the course of a couple of years, where you want to get to is you understand that this segment of your database responds in this way, and that's the very best path for them.
Yeah. So have you found, you've talked about, ask versus, or taking an action versus taking a donation. Have you found that there's been differences in response to different images, different colours, different lengths of copy?
Yep.
Have you found any interesting results out of that?
Every result is interesting in its own right. I think the one result I really loved was we increased the font size on a donation page, and it increased the response rate by like 10%. Just by increasing the font size. And it makes sense when you think about the core of our donors, the experience they want. These people are often a little bit older. And so, I have to lift my glasses up these days to read my books. And so by increasing the font size, you're providing a much better experience for someone online who is a little bit older and might have glasses and might need to be able to read things a little bit easier. And it's like, oh, this is nice and easy, click donate.
Yeah, that's a really great result. Is that part of the way you approach a campaign or an appeal? Do you come in saying not necessarily, how are we going to raise this funds, but do you say, what are we going to learn from this appeal?
Yeah, so I take a mix of both, because there's no point learning a whole bunch of stuff and not meeting the goal. So it's very much that test something, learn, iterate, keep moving. And I think this is the interesting thing about the way in which digital and traditional have been working together, is that they work at different paces. So for digital, we live in the right here and now, because we can pivot on a dime today if something's not working. But if you're doing traditional fundraising, you can't take that letter back. So you have to plan months in advance. And this leads to rub points within the teams, because the way in which we work is different, the way we plan can be different, and the way we respond and analyze is different. And so I know one of the things that can be infuriating for people at work is our results will change over the course of time because we pivot as we go, rather than having a set result of like, we tried this one thing all the way through. We tried this one thing, it wasn't working, so we did this thing, and then you start a new branch of results, and it can be quite confusing. Yeah. So that pace and nature of the way the two teams work can lead to a little bit of confusion.
Yeah, great. So pivoting is a huge part of what you do.
Yeah, definitely. Especially on, social media and Google in particular. So you can be running an ad on Google, people searching for Oxfam to make a donation around a particular appeal, and they're just not engaging with the wording that we've used. And we know that words mean something, as a Nat will tell you all of the time. So changing those words and understanding that, people might read the word emergency, for instance, and think, oh my God, what do? You need to call someone in an emergency. But should the word be, break down this barrier? Because a barrier is something that people know they can take down. An obstacle is something you can remove. Is that the thing that gets people more engaged? You can do that test straight away online. And you can change that and go, right, that's working for a high value audience. That's not working there over there at all. Let's kill that off. So you can just constantly pivot as you go. And the ideal scenario for us is that you collect all that information in the first month of an appeal going out. So the second month, when you start hitting that deadline, you're in a great space. You've already done your testing, you know exactly what works, and you know you're delivering the best possible ROI.
Yeah, I love that culture of being able to adapt. I think that's a very good answer. Just moving through the digital channels. So how important is search engine optimization, SEO, or search engine marketing, your Google ads, your Bing ads? How important is it in terms of generating income?
It's the heartbeat. It is the heartbeat of your online program. Because without that, you're going to lose 50% of your income. So people still search. Google is huge. We often talk about the shiny nature of social media and all the incredible, interesting things you can do on there, all the amazing things that you can do on websites, the interaction, all this kind of stuff. But when it comes down to it, the majority of people will still sit down at a desktop in the evening and type into Google, donate to, or the name of your charity to go and make their donation. You've sold them over the course of a day, of weeks, months, letters, phone calls, Facebook, email, etc., etc. But a lot of them will still go to their computer and type in donate to thing. And if you don't have a solid program set up, you're going to be losing opportunities for people to donate. The other really important thing with your Google portfolio is your brand name, your name. That is indicative of how you're going for me. Because if that heartbeat of people searching for your name is declining, something's wrong. That's like the canary in the coal mine. And when that starts to happen, you can raise that flag straight away and say, hold on one second, what's happening here? Are we losing people? What is it that we're saying that they're not engaging with so that they're not searching for us? Because 2 months ago we were flying fine. What's changed? So having that element set up is vitally important. And your SEO is another area that's changed a lot over the years. So it's still this big scary thing that people think is far too technical to understand, and they hire in SEO consultants. But the consultant will help you understand the technical aspects of an SEO program, brilliant. But where Google has moved to with its algorithms is much more around the content that you're producing. It's so much smarter than it was when I started out 10 years ago, when you could game that system with relative ease. Google now is saying, if you have got great, rich content that goes up regularly, that people are engaging with because they're spending time to read it, and people are sharing, that's an SEO strategy right there. So don't be afraid of SEO. Write good, rich content with meaning. Like, why would you create this post? Is it to tell people that your organization is doing X? Okay, is that valuable for the supporter? Because if it's not valuable for the supporter will read it and go, okay, cool. What do you want me to do with that? Yeah. But if you're designing that content with the supporter in mind, and they come there and they read that and go, oh, I'm part of this brilliant organization. They go have a kitchen table conversation about, the happiness they feel supporting your organization. That's an SEO strategy half done already.
Yeah, that's a great way of putting it. Maybe you're already doing a great SEO strategy without even knowing it. So in terms of social media, there'll be many fundraisers who think, I just need to do social media. I need to be posting. I mean, it's not that easy, really. What would be your advice to fundraisers struggling to sort of break through social media, trying to connect with new supporters? How hard is it in today's saturated market?
It's so much harder than it used to be. So, when social media first kicked off, you could post organically to your page and you'd reach all of your fans. Now you reach less than 3% of your fans. Social media, like I was saying earlier, these platforms need to monetize. Otherwise they go out of business. And so social media in particular has learned how to monetize in a big way. And so organizations need to adapt to that. So my thing with social is it is a pay-to-play space. If you're going to do social, you need budget. It is a marketing channel that you need to spend money on to deliver something back to. The days of it being this beautiful place where you could just post stuff and people will talk about it are just gone. They're long gone. But having said that, it is still a brilliant interactive way to communicate with people. And we often lose that element of conversation. But the conversation that you can have with people on social is incredibly important. It's not a place to just throw ads and broadcast like you would in email. It's a place to invite a conversation, to have that conversation, to provide an experience, to provide that authoritative voice on the thing you're talking about, to show people that you know what you're talking about, you're worthy of their time, energy, effort, and support. So social is a fantastic place for doing that. And social is also a really great place to give something to people. So that piece around giving an ebook was wrong initially, but what we've done is we've evolved that program into giving people stuff they want now. And so they'll give us an email address and we can give them something in return, which they can then use, which benefits their life. So that combined with the conversation you can have, combined with the power of multiple voices talking about something, having 10,000 people like something you're talking about, it's really important. It can really drive that social awareness that what you're talking about is a good thing. And even if you're not a supporter of that charity, if you see content that is really engaging, that has thousands of people liking it, that organisation is someone to take notice of. So there's a lot of really great stuff you can do on social. It's just evolved from where it was 5-10 years ago.
So let's say a fundraising manager gets $50, let's say $200. And you know what the CEO is going to say, we want to see a return on this. And it's probably in the fundraiser's nature to just go out with a strong ask, donate now to see a return on that. I'm sensing testing, analytics, messaging, all this stuff plays a part in terms of getting your ad right. What do you do with $200? What should you be doing quickly? How could you learn quickly? What insight should you be looking for to get a return on that?
If I had $200 and I was told you need to make $400 off of that, I put it into Google. Quite frankly, that's where you will make the return very quickly. Then you'd need to change the conversation to the next $200 you give me is purely to test. And I've done that before at Oxfam. When I first started out, the digital program was really small and I had to be in that situation of, you have got $1,000. That is all you've got. That's all you're going to get for digital to run this entire campaign. You need to make a bucket ton of money with that. And so I did. I focused it all on Google and I delivered a return on that investment, which then enabled the digital team to have a conversation later to say, right, the next budget you give me, 10% of that is for testing. I'll still deliver you a big return, but 10% is for testing. And then we'd be able to test. And then the next time we'd be able to deliver a better result because we had the 10% testing the last time. And so that's where you start to build a digital program from. Prove the concept first and foremost. Take the money, make some money. Take the next batch of money, take 5%, take 10% to do the testing, put that testing into it, increase your ROI, build and build and build from there.
And you can trace every dollar in terms of ROI back to your ad and your spend.
Yep. Now there is a blur. So Google does this thing called sampling. And what they'll give you back is within a sort of 5% margin of error. So often what we'll see is the results you see in Google Analytics don't match exactly the results in, say, your CRM that you're using. There's always a bit of a blur between the two. So that piece was something I stumbled on. Why are these results complete? What's going on here? It's simply because Google does sampling. But it gives you a very good guide online as to what's happening. But I'd always trust what goes into your CRM. That's the bit where you can really look at it.
How important is it to be learning how your visitors, donors, and supporters are engaging with your website? What should you be looking for specifically, and what tools should you be using to analyze that?
Yeah, that is a huge question. You could run 5-day workshops on that question. So there's a couple of things here. So a lot of organizations don't have their Google Analytics linked up with their CRM. That's an immediate thing that you need to work on, because since we've only really started doing that recently, and it's just opened up a whole new brilliant world of information that we can use. Now, if you're just looking within your Google Analytics and it's not talking to your CRM, that's fine, because there's a lot of work that you can do in analytics. So the first thing would be around myth busting. So I would often look at demographics and understand what demographics are giving and what they're giving to. That's point number one, because the targeting that you can do, you know, if you just go out there and target people who are interested in charity, great, good first step. However, 18-year-olds are not going to be giving you as much as 65-year-olds. So go into your analytics and see where's that cut-off point, where does it become profitable or unprofitable to talk to certain demographics. That's the number one easiest way to reduce spend and increase ROI. You can do that in your analytics. Find your sweet spot with age. Then start to look at channel. So if you've got a campaign out there, you know, is it email that is driving the final response, or is it search? That's a really interesting thing to look at, because is email actually driving the search response? Because they're two completely different strategies. And you can do that with relative ease. You can send your email out and then you can look at what happens with your search. Now, if you send an email out and you see your search spike and you see a bunch of money coming in there, fabulous. Now you know. Your next email, think about how you prime people to search for you. However, if you've seen people searching for you, not donating, then you send an email out and that spikes, brilliant. Change your search ad to prime them for email. So they're the two areas that I would look at that can be the simplest, easiest ways to deliver more impact.
Yeah, great. Sorry to throw such a big question. So fundraising managers who are watching this going, you know, I know the basics of Google Analytics. I know how to look for visit information, behavior patterns, acquisition channels. But what would be your advice for them to take their skills to the next level? What tools would they need to invest in and why?
So Google does offer a paid product, and it comes with a analytics specialist, and they can do things that are absolutely incredible. They can really help you drive forward your program. It is an investment. So if you're a larger organization, you could probably find the money for that investment. If you're a smaller organization, it would be hard to find that money for that investment. So I guess the advice would be different for both. If you've got the money, do it. Because that analytics expert will absolutely propel you forward in what you're doing. If you don't have that ability, then I'd recommend looking at, say, Avinash's Occam Razor's website. He's the guy that will go and tell Google what they're doing wrong with analytics. He's an absolute gem. He writes the way he talks, and I have learned so much from his blog and then applying it to my work. That would be another way to sort of do self-learning to propel you forwards. Because the thing with that kind of advice is each one of our organisations is different, and we each have different supporters and they each respond in different ways. And I don't think there is a one-size-fits-all answer that I could give to that. I think it's very much around you going on a journey of discovery with what you know about your people, and then reading what experts are up to, and then going, that's the bit for me. That's the one I need.
Yeah, no, that's a really good way of looking at it. It's hard. There's no exact answer, is there? Yeah. It's a big digital, knowing what to invest in and analysing data is just such a huge world in digital. So
yeah, and it's that thing of like, you don't know what questions to ask. So discovering the right questions to ask at the start of it will really help you.
So what do you think will change most in the next 10 years in terms of digital and fundraising?
So I think it's only going to get blurrier between the two. And you look what is happening with digital over the years, and it's becoming a channel that people are giving to more and more and more. I think that trend will continue. I think that balance we need to strike between teams is really important. I think that the perpetual motion of Silicon Valley will be the thing that is most important to keep on top of. So the use of VR, the use of AR will be things that fundraisers and marketeers and digital people and the whole smorgasbord of people need to really stay on top of, because if they pivot and you're not going with them, you're going to get left behind pretty quickly, because that's where they'll put all of the very best resources. You need to be playing in those spaces. I think the rise of voice search will be really important. So that's the sort of Google Home, Amazon Echo, all that kind of stuff. That will be a big change that happens in the industry, and how we keep up with that change, because in 5 years' time, might be able to just to say to Google, hey Google, give me, I want to make a donation to Oxfam, give them $10. Like, we're not prepared for that at the moment. So we need to really make sure we keep up with that, because we will all get left behind if we don't.
Yeah, do you think there's something right now, a missed opportunity for fundraisers in terms of utilising digital?
Yeah, I mean, I go back to chatbots and AI, I think is a really exciting area that we're not utilising at all. We're thinking about it from a supporter services point of view, which is great because it can be very functional and it can answer questions very quickly. Brilliant. But we're not utilising it from an engagement point to really convey these amazing emotional stories that we've got. You know, we can be storytellers on these channels and the tools are there, we're just not using them. So chatbots and AI is my current thing that I'm really banging the drum on. It's a huge missed opportunity.
You heard it here first. So, so now to the team environment, digital perceived within fundraising. Do you think there's problems in the way that digital is perceived by non-digital fundraisers?
Yeah, totally. And that's not just a problem in our sector, it's a problem across every organisation I see at the moment. Because, you know, digital has always been that weird kid in the corner of an organisation. And now we're sort of growing out of the awkward teen years and becoming people. And I don't think we've really fully understood how to deal with that within organisations. And also it's led to that sort of siloed approach. And I know that I get frustrated in my career because I've spent, you know, I've been in digital for 15 years, 10 years in the charity sector. And at every stage, I'm constantly having to prove my worth. And it gets tiring after a while, right? I don't think that we're in that stage of having to prove our worth now. We're in a new stage where we're having to figure out, well, where do we sit in an organisation? Should we all just sit in a fundraising team? Should we all sit in an ITS team? Should we all sit in a campaigning team? Like, where should we sit in an organisation? I'm a big advocate for independence, simply because there's that momentum within a team culture in digital. The pace that we were talking about earlier is different to other parts of an organisation. And if you've got people living and breathing that world, all working with each other, you're only going to propel yourself further and further forward. And if one of the threats to us is that these big companies will be doing different things and trying different things and moving forward, we need to keep up with them. Otherwise, we'll all get left behind. So that team needs to be able to do that and not get caught up in long-term planning procedures that don't enable that environment of agility that the digital team need in order to pivot and do their thing. So it is incredibly awkward at the moment within organisations. But I think the piece for me is like, lines and boxes won't fix this. What fixes this is the way in which we choose to work with each other. And that's what organisations in, say, Silicon Valley have done particularly well. You know, the Netflixes and Amazons and, you know, all this, and Spotify's have done incredibly well. They've put that culture of iteration. They've put that culture of de-evolved decision-making. It's a bit like the example we were using earlier with the emergency. You know, there's a sandbox there to work from. We need to make this amount of money. I've got this amount of money to give to you to make that money. Here's a bunch of images that are all approved. Now go do your thing. If we can figure out a way to do that in an organisation, silos disappear, frustrations disappear, and everyone starts kicking goals left, right, and centre. So that, for me, that creating that sandbox, creating that collective accountability, we're all in this together. It's not that racy model of the past where you're accountable because you've got some budget and you're just responsible. That doesn't work anymore. And we need to grow up as organisations to understand how that all comes together.
Yeah, and I'm sure there's many organisations who have this exact problem. Where does it fit in? And it's very interesting to hear how you put it in terms of, have it as its own team and propel forward that way. So very good answer. In terms of, let's say that you're a fundraising manager. Oh, I hate to put a tag on you like that for a hypothetical situation.
Yep.
But you want to embrace digital in your charity that's small and you haven't yet done so, but you're about to employ 2 digital people. What expertise and skill sets would you fill within those roles?
Sure. So first thing is a thorough grip of the discipline of marketing and fundraising, first and foremost. Secondly is someone who is a search marketeer, who understands that search channel, SEO, SEM, Google, Bing, all that kind of stuff, who gets that, lives and breathes it, because that's a unique skill set. The second one would be someone who can deliver a beautiful user experience and user interfaces on a website. So whether you'd have a dev team or not, I don't know, but someone that could do front-end design, preferably with a team that already does the back end and looks after the pipeline, so you don't cause frictions there. But there'd be the 2 skills that I would look to get the most, because one will drive instant ROI and one will drive brilliant supporter experience. Once you've got those 2 things set up, then you can start to make the case to get someone in who could do social.
Yeah, great. And you've been a leader for a while now at Oxfam. I think we even touched on it a bit earlier, but how do you get the best out of your team and what's your advice to them?
Yeah, so it's one of my favourite parts of this job is empowering my staff to follow their nose. And their nose is often head deep in data and insight. And from that comes gut feels that they have about something. And I'm all about that idea of taking a budget and putting 5-10% into, research and development. Let them follow their nose, because that's where they find those nuggets of gold that you would never think of. Because they're empowered, because they're chasing goals left, right, and centre. So the work that I do with my team is really around fostering that sandbox approach. I'm not there to sign stuff off. I can't remember the last time I actually signed something off. But because the way in which we work is so collaborative, we had a session yesterday where one of the team members really wanted to do something about a problem that we were having with contacting people that we'd acquired online. And so we sat down in a brainstorm, and they were the ones coming up with all the ideas. And then as a team, we joined up all of those ideas into something we could actually then do, and they're off doing it. At no stage has someone put together a formal proposal paper and come to me and said, can you sign this thing off? So that nature of collaboration within a team and busting that hierarchy that you have, like I don't sit here, I sit here with them. That for me has been the most sort of struggling to find the word, but the thing I enjoy the most about being a leader is fostering that culture within my team.
Yeah, you've probably sent shockwaves through a few head of departments there by saying that. So you're very passionate about teaching, and so much so that you teach digital fundraising through a digital intensive program called Organisations.
Yep.
What makes you so passionate about teaching digital fundraising to others?
Because, I got into this sector to put some good into the world and to help people. That's the thing that gets me out of bed in the morning. And I can do that through my work, and I can also do that through training new young people. So, a couple of times a year for an hour, I get to stand up in front of a brand new generation of people that want to get into fundraising and campaigning and mobilizing and all this kind of stuff using digital. And that's a thrill to be able to be there and help this next generation move forward. Because I think about when I was there, and like I was saying earlier, I literally had the Google Help section to help me understand what I should do to get involved in this world. Whereas now, like, being able to be there and give them some hot tips, some things I've done wrong, some things that went right, and helping them understand that they don't need to know everything. They don't need to be these unicorns, these expectations we put on people. They just need to know their thing that they want to know and really push for it, go for it. And that's a thrill.
And as for you, what's next for Aaron Lamb? When you look back at your career, what are you striving for?
I am striving for a couple of things, I guess. So firstly is getting that piece right between what's happened with digital as it's grown and traditional. And being in a place where we have that sandbox, we have that collective accountability, and we have that ability where we have a collaborative culture where everyone is playing to their strengths and kicking goals rather than the up and down sign-off matrices of the past. That for me, if I can get that right in an organisation, I will be so happy, because I really believe that is the way that we can generate experiences that would be brilliant for supporters. And you look at the world in which we live at the moment, it's more important than ever that our sector raises its game to a level it's never had before, that can really fight the forces that are going on out there in the world and can really deliver goodness into the world. So I think that's the way that we can do it. The other thing for me would be around constantly chasing the new pivot points that are coming out of the digital marketing sector. So what is it that Facebook's going to pivot to next? What is Google going to pivot to next? Like, that's the thing that keeps me constantly engaged. And being ahead of that curve all of the time is a constant driver and motivator. And when that happens, the thing for me is then understanding how to master that thing. So yeah, they're the two things that really keep me going and keep me moving forward.
Yeah, well, I hope I live to see the day of the first one anyway. All right, well, we're down to the last question. Aaron, so what's your final piece of advice to inspire and fulfill digital fundraisers to make a positive impact and create change for a better world?
My advice would be, don't be afraid of it, and lean on people who this is their strength. And understand that we have different viewpoints, and that's a good thing. It's a really good thing, because in that creative friction is where the real gold can be discovered. So, that's what we want, right?
Great advice. Aaron, thank you very much.
Thank you.
Cheers, thanks.